The night I agreed to marry my ex-wife's sister, I wasn't thinking about love. I wasn't thinking about second chances or redemption either. I was standing in a cold hospital hallway in Cleveland, staring at a frightened little boy who called me Uncle Mark, while doctors whispered that he might not survive the next 6 months. In that moment, a desperate promise changed all of our lives forever. I had no idea that the choice I made to save that child would also uncover a truth powerful enough to heal wounds I thought would never close. Before the story begins, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen when people choose compassion over pride, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. My name is Mark Callahan, and 5 years ago I thought my life had already fallen apart. My marriage to Rebecca had ended after 7 painful years. We hadn't divorced because we hated each other. In fact, the hardest part was that we still cared. But life had pulled us in different directions, and eventually the distance between us became wider than love could bridge. When the papers were signed, we both promised to move forward quietly. For a while, I did exactly that. I moved to a small apartment outside Cleveland, focused on my construction job, and tried to rebuild a routine that didn't include the woman who had once been my entire world. Rebecca eventually remarried and moved across town. We rarely spoke after that, except for the occasional polite message on holidays. Then one rainy afternoon, everything changed. I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Rebecca's younger sister, Sarah Whitmore. Her voice trembled so badly that at first I barely recognized her. Sarah had always been the quiet one in Rebecca's family, gentle and thoughtful, the kind of person who spoke softly but cared deeply. She asked if we could meet. When I saw her that evening at a small cafe, I immediately noticed how exhausted she looked. Her eyes were red, her shoulders slumped as if she had been carrying the weight of the world alone. Sitting beside her was her 6-year-old son, Noah. I hadn't seen the boy before, but the moment he looked up at me with wide, uncertain eyes, something inside my chest tightened. That was when Sarah told me the truth. Noah had a rare blood disorder. The doctors had tried everything, but his condition was getting worse. The treatments were expensive, and Sarah had already drained every savings account she had. The worst part was that her health insurance situation had become complicated after a recent job change. Without coverage, the treatments Noah needed were almost impossible to afford. Then she said something that stunned me. If she were legally married, Noah could qualify under a different family insurance plan connected to my employer. It was the only realistic way to get him the specialized treatment he needed. The problem was obvious. Sarah had no one to marry, and I was the last person she ever expected to ask. The silence between us felt heavy as the rain tapped softly against the cafe window. I remember staring at Noah as he quietly played with the toy car on the table, completely unaware that adults were discussing the fragile thread his life was hanging from. In that moment, pride, awkward history, and social judgment suddenly felt meaningless. Within 3 weeks, Sarah and I stood in a small courthouse in Ohio and signed a marriage certificate. There was no celebration, no music, no romantic promises. Just a desperate mother, a confused little boy, and a man trying to do the right thing. People talked, of course. Friends whispered that it was strange. Some accused me of still being attached to Rebecca's family. Others said the whole arrangement was reckless. But none of those opinions mattered when Noah finally started receiving the treatment he desperately needed. The months that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Hospital visits became routine. I spent nights sleeping in uncomfortable waiting room chairs, drinking terrible vending machine coffee while doctors monitored Noah's progress. Sarah tried to stay strong, but sometimes I would find her crying quietly in the hallway when she thought no one was looking. Through it all, something unexpected began to grow. Not romance, not at first, trust. Sarah and I slowly learned how to exist in the same space without the awkwardness that had followed our rushed marriage. We cooked simple dinners together after long hospital days. We took turns reading Noah bedtime stories. Sometimes we sat silently on the living room couch, too tired to speak but strangely comforted by the presence of someone who understood the exhaustion. Months passed. Then, one morning, the doctor delivered the news we had been praying for. Noah's condition was improving. The treatments were working. For the first time in nearly a year, Sarah cried tears of relief instead of fear. She hugged Noah so tightly that he giggled and told her she was squeezing too hard. That should have been the happy ending, but life rarely wraps things up so neatly. Just as Noah's health began to stabilize, Rebecca suddenly appeared at our door. Seeing her again after so many years felt like stepping back into a memory I had carefully locked away. She looked older, wiser, but her eyes still held the same warmth I remembered. She hadn't come to create drama. She had come with a quiet confession. Rebecca admitted that when she first heard about our marriage, she was angry and confused, but over time, she realized something important. She knew Sarah better than anyone, and she knew me. She understood that the only reason I would agree to something like this was because I genuinely cared about helping someone who needed it. Then she told me something that stunned me. Long before the divorce, Rebecca had often worried about her sister. She knew Sarah had always been the one who sacrificed the most for others. Rebecca had once said that if anyone deserved someone dependable in her life, it was Sarah. Standing there in my living room, Rebecca smiled softly and said that maybe life had simply found an unexpected way to answer that wish. That night, after Rebecca left, Sarah and I sat on the porch watching Noah chase fireflies in the yard. For the first time since our courthouse wedding, we talked honestly about the future. The truth was simple. What began as a legal arrangement had slowly become something deeper. We had survived fear together. We had carried each other through the darkest days of uncertainty. Somewhere between hospital visits and late-night conversations, a quiet bond had formed. Not rushed, not forced, just real. 2 years later, Noah ran across a school playground completely healthy, laughing with friends while Sarah stood beside me watching him with pride shining in her eyes. That was the moment I realized something extraordinary. The marriage that started as an act of desperation had grown into a family built on compassion, patience, and resilience. And sometimes the most beautiful love stories aren't the ones that begin with passion. They're the ones that begin with kindness. Before we finish this story, I want to ask you something special. If this journey touched your heart in any way, please comment the word hope below. It helps us know that stories about kindness and second chances still matter in this world. And if this story reminded you that even broken paths can lead to beautiful destinations, please like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you stories that inspire and move the heart. Because sometimes the life you never expected becomes the life you were always meant to live.